let's dive deep today. We're tackling, Jordan Peterson's rule hierarchy.
Okay.
Those guidelines for living that Peterson uh, puts forward, based on all sorts of things, from biology to ancient myths.
Right.
And so we're going to climb this hierarchy together,
Yeah.
starting with the foundation, the biological stuff,
Right.
then up to social rules, and finally the spiritual and psychological. But, the best part, the coolest part is we're going to pull out actionable takeaways that you can actually use.
I like it.
Oh, and get ready for this. Our journey starts with lobsters.
Lobsters.
I know, right? Who would have thought?
It might sound a little strange.
Yeah.
But Peterson uses lobsters to make a point about how basic some of these rules are. I mean, they've been around for millions of years.
Yeah.
And even they have a pecking order. And the thing is, their serotonin levels, that's the brain chemical linked to mood, are directly connected to their status. A dominant lobster has more serotonin. And guess what? They literally stand taller, more confident.
So it's like their brain chemistry is impacting their physical presence.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. But how does this translate to humans? I mean, we're not exactly, cruising the ocean floor claws snapping.
Well, you might be surprised. Studies have shown that even in humans, posture influences mood.
Okay.
Just think about it. When you're feeling down, you tend to slump over,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you consciously straighten up, shoulders back, head high,
Yeah.
it can actually shift your mood in a positive direction. It's like sending a signal to your brain, hey, we're in charge here.
It's like faking it till you make it, but on a biological level.
Right.
That's actually a pretty empowering thought.
Exactly. And Peterson takes it a step further. He talks about this internal counter lobsters have.
Oh, okay.
It's like a threat assessment system. A low-status lobster is constantly on edge, their counter's going haywire, always expecting trouble. And he connects this to the human stress response.
Yeah.
When we feel vulnerable or low status, our bodies pump out those stress hormones.
Right.
And chronic stress, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, no, I'm starting to see where he's going with this. So it's not just about standing tall to, look good. It's about reducing our vulnerability, both physically and mentally.
Yeah.
So we're not constantly in that fight or flight mode. Is that what he means by emergency preparedness?
Precisely. It's not just about stocking up on canned goods and bottled water.
Right.
It's about making ourselves more resilient, less reactive to every little thing. It's about having a plan, taking care of your health, building that inner strength.
So what you're saying is even on a biological level, there are things we can do, actionable steps, to make ourselves more resilient, less susceptible to the negative impacts of stress. It's not just about accepting our lot in life, but about taking control, even of our own biology.
That's a great way to put it. And this is just the first step in Peterson's hierarchy. We've got the biological foundation, but now we need to climb to the next level, the social rules. This is where things get really interesting because it involves our interactions with others,
Right.
the choices we make about who we let into our lives.
This reminds me of something that happened with my friend Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Back in high school.
Okay.
Chris was a bright guy, bookworm like me, loved sci-fi, but his home life was a mess. He was always angry, resentful, like he'd already given up on life. And sadly, he started hanging out with a crowd that wasn't exactly what you'd call a good influence.
And this ties into Peterson's rule. Make friends with people who want the best for you. It seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people ignore this basic principle. The company we keep, the people we surround ourselves with, they have a huge impact on our lives, our choices, even who we become.
It's true. Looking back, I can see how Chris's friends enabled his downward spiral.
Yeah.
They weren't exactly role models for success or even basic responsibility. They just fueled his negativity.
This is where Peterson's idea of uncritical compassion comes in. Sometimes we think we're helping people by, just being there for them, no matter what they do. But are we really helping if we're not challenging them, encouraging them to make better choices?
So it's like tough love is sometimes the more compassionate option. Holding people accountable, even if it means risking their anger or disapproval.
It can be.
That's a tough pill to swallow, especially when it's someone you care about.
It is tough, but it's something to consider. Are you enabling someone to stay stuck in their misery? Or are you supporting their growth, even if it's uncomfortable? Peterson would argue that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is step back and let someone face the natural consequences of their actions. It might be the wake-up call they need.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's like sometimes the kindest thing you can do is not be everyone's best friend, but to be the person who pushes them to be better. So the takeaway here is to be mindful of our friendships, to ask ourselves, are these people truly supportive? Do they want the best for me, or are they holding me back?
Exactly. And those are tough questions to ask, but important ones, because the quality of our relationships has a ripple effect on every other area of our lives.
And speaking of relationships and maybe a bit of that tough love, let's move on to the next social rule, parenting.
Yeah.
Peterson had some pretty strong opinions on how we raise the next generation.
He does, and it all comes back to that idea of order versus chaos that he talks about so much. He believes children thrive in structure,
Right.
with clear boundaries and consequences. They need to understand the rules of the game, so to speak, and what happens when those rules are broken.
He tells this story about a child who wasn't allowed to learn the word no and the disastrous consequences that followed.
Yeah.
It's a pretty stark illustration of how avoiding discipline just to be the cool or nice parent can actually harm a child in the long run.
Right. It's not about being liked.
Yeah.
It's about being respected. And that respect comes from being a responsible parent, someone who prepares their child for the real world, a world that doesn't always cater to their every whim. Peterson would say that tolerating a child's temporary anger after being disciplined is actually a sign of good parenting.
So it's about teaching them self-control, responsibility, the ability to deal with frustration and setbacks. Basically, giving them the tools they need to navigate life effectively.
Right.
Sounds like a pretty important job.
Absolutely. And Peterson emphasizes that discipline shouldn't be abusive, of course. He advocates for techniques like timeouts, which are about teaching self-regulation and understanding consequences, not about inflicting pain or humiliation.
Okay, so let's recap those parenting takeaways. Set clear boundaries, enforce consequences consistently, but do it in a way that's firm but fair, teaching rather than punishing. And remember, it's not about being their best friend, but about equipping them with the skills they need to thrive.
Well said. And with that, we've explored the first two levels of Peterson's hierarchy. We've got the biological foundation, and we started to build on that with some crucial social rules. But now we need to reach for the highest level, the spiritual and psychological.
Right.
This is where we get into the deeper meaning of life, the values we choose to guide our actions. Ready to climb.
Lead the way. I'm definitely intrigued to see where this goes.
All right, let's start with one of Peterson's most well-known rules: tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Seems simple enough, right?
Yeah.
But he connects this to a much bigger idea, sacrificing expediency for meaning. He often uses the story of Christ's temptation in the desert to illustrate this point.
Okay, I'm listening. What does Christ being tempted have to do with telling the truth?
Well, in that story, Christ is offered worldly power and gratification, but chooses to resist.
Yeah.
Peterson interprets this as a choice between immediate gratification and something more enduring, something more meaningful. He argues that choosing the easy path, the convenient lie, might feel good in the moment, but it chips away at our integrity, at our very soul.
That's a powerful thought. You know, it actually reminds me of something I went through back in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
I had this major life lie realization, as Peterson would call it.
Oh.
Well, I was studying psychology, which sounds relevant to all of this, right?
Yeah.
But deep down, I wasn't really passionate about it.
Yeah.
I was more drawn to, well, I guess you could say the big questions of life, you know, the existential stuff.
Okay.
But I was afraid to admit that, even to myself.
Mm.
So I kept going down this path that wasn't truly aligned with my values.
It sounds like you were living someone else's dream, not your own. And that's a classic example of a life lie. Peterson talks about how these lies we tell ourselves, even seemingly small ones, can build up and create a huge disconnect between who we are and who we pretend to be.
Exactly. And it took a lot of soul searching, some difficult conversations. But eventually I realized I needed to be honest with myself. I had to confront that life lie and make a change.
Right.
And let me tell you, it wasn't easy, but it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
That's really inspiring, and it perfectly illustrates Peterson's point. Confronting those life lies, those inconsistencies between our actions and our values, is a crucial step in personal growth. And it all starts with honesty, with that commitment to telling the truth, starting with ourselves.
Okay, so So the takeaway here is to be brutally honest with ourselves,
Yes. Yeah.
to look for those areas where we might be lying, even in small ways, and to start making choices that align with our true values.
Right.
Easier said than done, but definitely worth the effort.
Absolutely. And this commitment to truth, to authenticity is just the beginning. Peterson goes even deeper, exploring the idea of aiming for paradise, which he often illustrates with the story of Geppetto in Pinocchio.
Wait, Pinocchio. What does a children's story have to do with the meaning of life?
It's actually a brilliant analogy. Geppetto the woodcarver creates Pinocchio, but he yearns for him to be more than just a puppet. He wishes upon a star for Pinocchio to become a real boy,
Yeah.
a fully realized being.
Okay.
And Peterson sees this as a metaphor for setting our sights on the highest good,
Right.
on striving for something beyond our immediate circumstances, even while we're diligently attending to the present moment.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. It's about having a vision, something to strive for, something that gives our lives meaning and purpose. But what does that look like in practical terms?
Well, for Peterson, it's about aligning our actions with a value structure that aims at bettering being. It's about recognizing that we're part of something larger than ourselves and making choices that contribute to the good of the whole.
So it's not just about personal success. It's about contributing to something bigger, something that transcends our own individual needs and desires.
Right.
But how do we even begin to do that?
Yeah.
It feels like such a big abstract concept.
It can feel overwhelming, but Peterson offers a simple starting point.
Okay.
Choose one small thing you can do today to make your life or the world a tiny bit better.
Yeah.
It could be helping a neighbor, expressing gratitude, cleaning up your room, or simply being a little kinder to yourself.
Yeah.
The point is to start aligning your actions with those higher values, those aspirations toward paradise.
I love that. Small steps, big impact. It's about recognizing that we all have the power to make a difference, even in seemingly insignificant ways. And that brings us to the end of the spiritual and psychological level of Peterson's hierarchy.
Indeed. We've climbed from the biological foundations, through the complexities of social roles, all the way to the heights of spiritual and psychological principles. It's been quite a journey. But this is just the beginning of our exploration. There's so much more to unpack in Peterson's work. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll delve even deeper into these ideas and discover even more actionable insights. You know, it's fascinating how these seemingly simple acts of bettering being can actually tie back to the biological level we discussed earlier.
Right.
Remember those lobsters and their serotonin levels?
Yeah.
Well, when humans act in accordance with their values, when they do something they believe is truly good, it triggers a similar boost in serotonin.
So it's like we're wired to feel good when we do good.
Yeah.
That makes sense, but it also seems a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Huh.
I mean, doing the right thing can be hard.
Right.
It often requires sacrifice and self-discipline.
Uh-huh.
Why would our brains reward us for
Well,
that?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what Peterson's trying to get at. He'd argue that our biological reward system evolved for a reason. Those feel-good chemicals like serotonin, they helped our ancestors survive and thrive back then. Doing the right thing often meant cooperating with your tribe, being brave in the face of danger, protecting your family. These were the behaviors that increased their chances of survival and passing on their genes.
So it's like those ancient instincts are still with us. Even in our modern world, we might not be facing down saber-toothed tigers anymore, but that urge to contribute, to be part of something bigger than ourselves, it's still there driving us on a biological level.
Exactly. And Peterson would say that understanding this connection, this interplay between our biology and our values can be incredibly empowering. It means that doing the right thing isn't just a moral obligation, it's actually aligned with our deepest instincts, our biological imperative to thrive.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but it's still a lot to take in. Peterson throws a lot of ideas at you, doesn't he? He draws on so many different sources, from psychology and philosophy to ancient myths and religious texts.
Right.
It can feel a bit overwhelming even for someone who's familiar with his work.
It's true. He's a very erudite speaker, and he doesn't shy away from complexity. But I think that's also what makes him so compelling. He's not afraid to ask the tough questions, to grapple with the big ideas, and to challenge our assumptions about the world and our place in it.
He definitely doesn't shy away from controversy either.
No, he doesn't.
But I think that's part of what makes him so popular. He's not afraid to speak his mind, even if it goes against the grain of conventional wisdom.
And I think that's refreshing for a lot of people in a world where everyone seems to be afraid to offend anyone. Peterson's willingness to stand up for what he believes in, to speak his truth, is inspiring even if you don't agree with everything he says.
It's interesting how he talks about the importance of having a noble aim in life.
Yeah.
It's like that vision we were talking about earlier. But on a more personal level, it's something that gives you a sense of direction and motivation, something worth striving for. And it doesn't have to be something grandiose like saving the world. It could be something as simple as being a good parent, pursuing a creative passion, or just trying to make a positive impact on your community.
Exactly. It's about finding something that resonates with your values, something that gives your life meaning and purpose. And that noble aim can actually be a powerful tool for navigating the challenges of life when you have a clear sense of what you're striving for. It's easier to stay focused, to make difficult choices, and to persevere through setbacks.
So it's like that North Star guiding you through the ups and downs of life, reminding you of what's truly important. I
Right?
like that analogy, but even with a noble aim, life can still be tough.
Of course.
We all face setbacks, failures, and disappointments.
Yeah.
How does Peterson's hierarchy help us deal with those darker aspects of human experience?
That's a really important question. And Peterson doesn't sugarcoat the realities of life. He acknowledges that suffering is an inevitable part of the human condition, but he also emphasizes that we have the power to choose how we respond to that suffering. We can either let it defeat us, or we can use it as fuel for growth and transformation.
He often talks about the concept of post-traumatic growth, the idea that we can emerge from difficult experiences stronger and more resilient than before. So it's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly. And Peterson would say that finding meaning in suffering is essential for living a fulfilling life. It's not about denying or repressing the pain, but about acknowledging it, learning from it, and using it as a springboard for growth and self-discovery.
So it's like those difficult experiences, those times when we're forced to confront our own limitations and vulnerabilities. Those are the times when we have the greatest opportunity to grow and evolve. It's like that idea that the wound is the place where the light enters.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it highlights the importance of resilience, of that ability to bounce back from adversity, to learn from our mistakes, and to keep moving forward even when things are tough.
And that resilience is something we can cultivate, right?
Yes.
It's not just some innate quality that some people have and others don't. There are things we can do to build our resilience, to strengthen our ability to cope with stress and adversity.
Absolutely. And Peterson offers a lot of practical advice on how to do that. He emphasizes the importance of things like taking care of your physical health, building strong relationships, finding meaning and purpose in your life, and developing a growth mindset.
So it's like all those levels of his hierarchy are working together, supporting each other. The biological foundation helps us to regulate our emotions and build physical resilience. The social rules guide us in forming healthy relationships that provide support and connection, and the spiritual and psychological principles help us define meaning and purpose, even in the midst of suffering.
Exactly. It's a holistic approach to life, recognizing that all of these aspects of our being are interconnected and interdependent.
One of the criticisms that's often leveled at Peterson is that he's too focused on individual responsibility and doesn't adequately address systemic issues like poverty, inequality, and discrimination. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a valid point, and Peterson would likely agree that those systemic issues are real and need to be addressed. However, he would also argue that individual responsibility is still crucial even in the face of injustice and adversity. We still have the power to make choices that can improve our lives and the lives of those around us.
So it's not about ignoring those larger issues. It's about recognizing that we can still make a difference even within the constraints of those systems. It's about focusing on what we can control on our own choices and actions.
Exactly, and those choices can have a ripple effect, inspiring others to do the same and creating momentum for positive change. It's like that Gandhi quote, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world."
That's a powerful thought, and it brings us back to that idea of bettering being.
Hmm.
Even small acts of kindness, courage, and responsibility can contribute to a more just and compassionate world. But it all starts with each individual taking ownership of their own life, of their choices and actions.
I couldn't agree more, and that brings us to the halfway point of our deep dive into Jordan Peterson's rule hierarchy. We've explored the biological foundation, the social rules, and even touched on the spiritual and psychological principles, but there's still so much more to uncover. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll delve deeper into the complexities of truth-telling, confront the shadow side of our personalities, and discover how even lobsters can teach us about the importance of winning.
All right, so we're back, ready to finish our climb of Peterson's rule hierarchy. We've talked about lobsters, stress, friendship, parenting, even Pinocchio and aiming for paradise. What's left to explore?
Well, we've only scratched the surface of Peterson's emphasis on truth telling. It's not just about being honest with others. It's
Mm-hmm.
about being honest with ourselves, confronting those life lies,
Yeah.
those that can keep us stuck in unhealthy patterns.
It's funny. We often think of lying as this big, dramatic act of deception. But Peterson points out that we lie in small ways all the time,
Yeah.
almost without thinking about it.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves we'll start that diet tomorrow, or that we're not really that bothered by our friends' inconsiderate behavior. It's like we're constantly weaving this web of little lies to protect our egos, to avoid discomfort.
Exactly. And those little lies, they add up, they chip away at our integrity, create a disconnect between who we are and who we pretend to be. And Peterson would argue that this kind of self-deception can have a profound impact on our mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah, it's like we're building this wall between ourselves and reality, and eventually that wall starts to crumble. We lose touch with what's true, what's real, and it becomes harder to make authentic choices that align with our values.
He compares it to a debt, a sacrificial debt, as he puts it. Each time we choose the easy lie over the difficult truth, we're essentially borrowing happiness from our future selves, and eventually that debt comes due.
That's a pretty sobering thought. It's like we're mortgaging our own happiness for the sake of momentary comfort or convenience. But how do we break free from that cycle? How do we start being more honest with ourselves?
It's not easy, but Peterson suggests starting with small steps.
Okay.
Pay attention to those moments when you're tempted to lie, even to yourself. Notice those little rationalizations, those justifications for why it's okay to bend the truth. And then start making a conscious effort to choose honesty, even when it's uncomfortable.
So it's like building a muscle, the honesty muscle. The more we practice it, the easier it becomes. And I guess that builds trust, not just in ourselves, but in our relationships with others as well.
Absolutely, because when we're honest with ourselves, we're more likely to be honest with others. And that creates a foundation of trust and authenticity that is essential for any meaningful relationship.
Okay, so we're being honest with ourselves, confronting those life lies. What's next on Peterson's truth-telling agenda?
Well, this is where things get even more interesting. Peterson argues that to truly embrace truth, we have to be willing to confront the shadow side of our personalities.
The shadow side. Sounds a bit ominous. What exactly does that mean?
He's drawing on Jungian psychology here. The idea that we all have a part of ourselves that we keep hidden, even from ourselves.
Right.
It's the part that contains our negative impulses, our fears, our insecurities, the things we deem unacceptable or unworthy.
So it's like the dark side of our personality, the stuff we try to repress or deny.
Exactly. And Peterson argues that this repression, this refusal to acknowledge our shadow can actually be incredibly destructive. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Eventually it's going to pop up, often in ways that are unexpected and even harmful.
So what's the alternative? How do we deal with this shadow side without letting it,
Yep.
take over?
Peterson suggests that we need to integrate our shadow to become aware of those darker impulses and to learn how to manage them constructively. It's not about indulging those impulses, but about understanding them, accepting them as part of who we are, and finding healthy ways to channel that energy.
Okay, but how do we do that in practice? It sounds like a pretty daunting task.
It is. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront those parts of ourselves that we might not like very much. But Peterson offers some practical tools for this process. He emphasizes the importance of things like journaling, meditation, therapy, and engaging in creative pursuits that allow us to express those shadow impulses in a safe and constructive way.
So it's like we're not trying to get rid of our shadow, but to make peace with it, to find a way to coexist with it without letting it, control us. It's like a dance, a delicate balance between light and darkness.
That's a beautiful analogy, and it highlights the complexity of the human psyche. We're not all good or all bad. We contain multitudes, as Whitman said, and embracing that complexity, accepting both the light and the shadow within us is essential for psychological wholeness and for living an authentic life.
Okay, so we're being honest with ourselves, confronting our shadow side, choosing truth over expediency. It sounds like a pretty intense process. Is there any room for fun in Peterson's world?
Actually, yes. Remember those lobsters we talked about earlier?
Oh.
Well, Peterson points out that lobsters who win fights actually experience a surge of serotonin,
Yeah.
which makes them more likely to win future fights. It's a positive feedback loop where success breeds more success.
So it's like those winning lobsters are getting a taste of the good life, and their brains are saying, let's do that again.
Exactly. And Peterson argues that humans have a similar biological response to success and achievement.
Right.
When we set goals, work hard, and achieve those goals, we experience a surge of those feel-good chemicals that reinforce those behaviors. It's like our brains are rewarding us for being effective, for moving forward in life.
So it's not just about gritting our teeth and powering through. It's about finding those activities, those pursuits that actually light us up, that give us a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. It's about playing to our strengths, finding those areas where we can excel and experience that natural high of success.
I love that. It's like we're tapping into our own internal reward system, aligning our actions with our natural inclinations, and in the process, we're becoming more confident, more competent, and more fulfilled.
So it's not just about avoiding negative emotions. It's about cultivating positive ones. It's about finding that sweet spot where our efforts are aligned with our values, our skills, and our deepest desires. And in that process, we're not just surviving, we're thriving.
Beautifully said. And that brings us to the end of our journey up Peterson's rule hierarchy. We've covered a lot of ground from the biological foundations of behavior to the heights of spiritual and psychological aspiration. But remember, this is just the starting point. There's so much more to explore in Peterson's work, and we encourage you to dive deeper, to continue this journey of self-discovery and personal growth.
And remember, it's not about achieving perfection. It's about striving for progress, one small step at a time. Choose honesty, confront your shadow, find your noble aim, and don't forget to celebrate your victories along the way. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep aiming high.